And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
Attention, roll call.
That's right, everybody. Good morning, 8:05 live Eastern Time. And, of course, 5:05 Pacific Time. It's still dark outside. It is cold, brother. I got to say, even in California, that's one thing I miss. I miss RVing in Florida because during the wintertime, I tell you, that's where you eat it up. I know you had a cold front and you had some wacky weather for a while, but when you're in Florida in the winter, especially in an RV, you come outside the RV, it's like the sun hits you, whoosh, you're like, wow. Right now, at night, it's cold. I didn't pass through a lot of snow. Like, yeah, man, I got up this morning, and it's not even morning. It's still dark. I'm freezing. But, so, good morning. Let's get into it. NYPD executive social media post deemed irresponsible, unprofessional. I'm just going to say this, John. Wow. It took this long to figure that out. It's kind of the obvious. What do you think?
Yeah, we've only been saying it for about 2 years. It's wild. So, listen, before we get into that, let's just talk about some political news because I think it's important. Albanese have put a tweet out yesterday. And basically the tweet's reflective of that the mayor could possibly be stepping down. And I don't know how we feel about that. I don't know how to feel about it. I don't know if it's legit. I don't know if it's not. It kind of makes sense. I'm hearing a bunch of different rumors about what could possibly happen with this. So this is his tweet. A usually good source tells me New York City mayor is cutting a deal with the feds and resigning in 72 hours. This guy has been reliable in the past, but who knows? What are your thoughts about Sal Albanese's tweet?
Well, I'll tell you what, if you would have asked me this a month ago, I would have said, you're crazy. No way. It's Eric Adams stepping down. But, obviously things are taking a turn for the worst. I wouldn't say never, but I think everything is headed in that direction. I think I don't know who his source is, obviously, but it sounds credible to me. And I think all the chess pieces I said before, I believe this is checkmate at this point. He goes left, he's getting indicted. He goes right, he's not getting pardoned. He can't get forward. He doesn't have his cronies and his nepotism anymore in his administration. So the cards have come down. I think that it's very possible. And I think this whole potential ploy, and I don't want to say definite because God forbid I'm wrong, but it does seem like the boy who cried wolf. When it comes down to his potential medical condition, I think that this appears to be a ploy. Everything's moving in that direction. When we talk about the public advocate, that seems to be the thing. So, I don't know. Listen, shout out Jonathan Fredericks, Coffee and Donuts. Says, good morning, everyone. Good morning to you. Jump in with us, weigh in with your thoughts, and what do you think about this? John, I will have to say I'm starting to change my opinion as far as Eric Adams stepping down. I think that's coming soon. I just don't think he's going to actually submit to it in a sense, say, hey, I'm stepping down. He's going to say, due to medical reasons, I have to step down. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, so you know what? Then that's the thing. I heard two things. I heard one, he's going to step down, which means then that traditional method of I'm stepping down. I cut a deal with the feds. I'm on the traditional method of a mayor stepping down, and that would mean that Jumaane Williams would step in as mayor until an election was had. There is no longer a special election coming. We're past that point, so it would be a full election. Jumaane would be the mayor straight through. He did do an executive order a few months ago. I don't know if you remember that if he was like medically incapacitated or something, that it would fall to the deputy mayor. I don't know if legally that's going to stand up, but I agree with you. And I hear a lot of rumors that that is exactly what he's going to say, is that he's medically incapacitated and that the deputy mayor is going to take over, and Kathy Hochul will approve this. So again, rumors, we don't know. We have no idea. But yeah, I'm thinking, like I said it, I don't see how he makes it out of here. I just didn't. And the rumors that I heard is that his case was reviewed and there is evidence of him specifically threatening witnesses on wiretap. So the mayor of New York is acting like a thug, is the rumor, threatening people. And because of that, obviously, he wouldn't be eligible for a pardon.
I got a chuckle on this one because I tell you what, if this was any other mayor of New York City, I would be shock and awe. Like, wow, this is what's going on in New York City. But at this point, it's kind of business as usual. I'm not surprised. Just another aspect when it comes to the toolbox of Eric Adams and his administration. I'm not surprised. I mean, John, you and I have sounded the horn for 2 years now. We would call radicals, we called all kinds of crazy names. No one, I mean, not no one. Let's say no one, but a lot of the cops that we spoke to, like, oh, you're crazy. We get a contract. Adams was a cop, and they saw the good life. That's what they wanted to say. But and you and I, what did we say? Nah, they're running a criminal enterprise. Right away, we both said nepotism equates to corruption, equates to a criminal enterprise. Look at his political career. Look at his appointments. Like, you see it, don't you see it? It's right there. Why don't you see it? And here we are. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. I wouldn't be surprised if Eric Adams, did specifically just himself. But at this point, desperation leads to desperate measures.
Yeah. So another thing on the political front is Ina. Ina Vernikov, David Carr, Joe Borelli. So what happened here, what you're looking at here is Joe Borelli stepping down. He's becoming a lobbyist. So he is the minority leader. So it was rumored that he was going to push David Carr to be the minority leader. What needs to happen is a vote needs to happen. So apparently Joe Borelli pulled a move out of the PBA's hat, and what he did was he called a meeting. Joanne Ariola, Vicky Palladino were not eligible to attend the meeting. They said, listen, we have a conflict. We can't be at the meeting. So since they had a conflict, Joe Borelli held the vote, them three, and called that David Carr is the minority leader. David Carr's running around now telling everyone he's the minority leader. I think you're going to see a legal battle, and they're holding on to the bylaws. I think this move ultimately just shows Joe on his way out the door being who Joe Borelli actually is, a sneaky fraud. Because this is absolutely disgusting. There's absolutely no integrity. There's no ethics on the part of all three of them. I'm no fan of Joe. I'm no fan of David Carr. I believe they were dead silent on a lot of issues. I did like Ina Vernikov better than the both of them. But honestly, the fact that she's aligning herself with them two is really another questionable thing that I don't understand it for the life of me. And the rumors is that Ina is going along with this because she has an ethics review. If you guys remember that her firearm had lifted up, her firearm was exposed while she was at a rally, and she was subsequently arrested, and the case was dropped over it. So she has an ethics review coming up, and David Carr sits on the ethics board. So he said, if you vote for me, as I don't know that that's said, but this is what people are alleging, that because he's on the ethics board and she has this ethics review, that's why she's pushing David Carr for minority leader. I mean, the bottom line is this: whether that conversation was had or it's not, it's 100% a conflict of interest. She shouldn't even be allowed to vote on for Carr.
What's amazing to me is how you could assimilate how things happen and actually analyze and compare it to actually law enforcement. Like, everything somehow compares to law enforcement. As soon as I saw this, and I knew we were going to talk about it today, right away I thought of Franklin Valdez. Right away I thought, and John, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, I wonder if he's thinking about Franklin, because to me, this is like a mirror image of what happened to Franklin Valdez from transit when he was actually running in the union, and when Pat Hendry was elected. To me, this was actually just like on par with that. Just the amount of pretty much how it was a lockout and it was a fraud when it came to that actual election. There was no actual election when it came to Pat Hendry. Pat Hendry was there by default. The whole thing was a complete ploy. It was all calculated. And to me, here's the same thing. When people are getting locked out, they're not actually getting the bylaws. There's no difference to me, but this is exactly on par. What do you think, John?
Yeah, no, I think 100%. You're seeing the exact same thing. It's a rigged election. It's honestly, it's the furthest thing from integrity. It's like, and Ina was like, oh, it's in our bylaws. And I was like, Ina, this is like this is like you running around the boxing ring with a boxing championship belt saying, I'm the champion, but you never even fought anybody. You didn't even fight. I was like, I don't care what your bylaws say. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Common sense dictates that if there's going to be an election of who the minority leader, then all the members in the minority caucus should be able to vote on it, that you don't hold a sneaky meeting that people aren't available for and pass a vote and do this. I mean, it just shows the character of Joe Borelli. It shows the character of David Carr. It shows the character of Ina Vernikov. And honestly, it shows that David Carr is the furthest thing but anyone would consider a leader. And not just this move, but his his whole past, his accomplishments or lack of in city council and his time in city council dictate that he is the furthest thing but a leader. I smashed him online because he was deserving of it. He was my representative. He did absolutely nothing for me. He completely ignored me. He pretended like I didn't exist. He didn't listen to anything I had to say, ultimately causing me to leave New York City. Furthest thing from a representative. David Carr's a failure. He's not a leader. He's a follower. He's another Joe Borelli, another go along to get along politician. Might as well be a Democrat because it doesn't matter.
That's exactly what this is. Go along to get along. There's no doubt about it. And then we see the same thing with the union when it comes to the NYPD. For the most part, the delegates and the trustees are go along to get along because they see themselves moving up with the union, but not moving up with the NYPD. It's almost like it's its own entity. And that's what happened here. Go along to get along and pretty much lock people out. And there's no actual election. It's the same thing with Pat Hendry. There was no election. The whole thing was a complete fraud. And so is this. So I'm not surprised. Listen, the bottom line, listen, there's plenty of times, John, you take the opportunity to beat up Joe Borelli. And there are many times I would say, and I think to myself, you know what? Joe Borelli is to me, he's no amazing politician, but okay, but sometimes he tried to speak out on the congestion price. I'll say he tried because he didn't really do a good job. When he said it was a victory, that was complete, to me, that was complete gaslighting. But I have to say, I think you're right. I think at this point, this was the point where I said, you know what? John's right. He definitely validated this guy's a complete loser. And Joe Borelli does not care. And to me, he's a complete cuck when it comes to Republicans. And he's a quasi-Democrat. There's no doubt about it. I think they all are. They're all quasi-Democrats. And that's what it comes down to. They show no better than these Democratic socialists. When it comes down, when they want things done a certain way, they play the game and they shut people out. This is a complete fraud.
And just real quick before we go on the next one, I just got to go back. I said that there was no special election. I was wrong. I'm being told, should Adams resign within 90 days of the June primaries, no special election would be held. In that case, the acting mayor would stay the mayor until a new mayor is elected in November. That person would immediately take office. It's 146 days right now until the June 24th primary. That means special if he's out before 90. The entire reason he's being removed, if he's being pushed, is that timeline. So that's coming by way of Scooch. He just sent me that message. So thank you for that, Scooch. Appreciate it. So that it potentially is a special election coming, which that means is up for grabs. That means it's going to be a wild mayoral race.
Well, it makes sense, right? Everything starts to point in that direction, which is why I do believe that Eric Adams is actually going to step down at this point. I just don't believe he'll ever submit by saying the words, I step down, and here's why, as normal people would do. But the characteristics of Eric Adams, let's not expect that. No surprise. I didn't know about this 90 days. That's good. That's why, that's what's great about this long form podcast and having friends and listeners on the podcast, build this network. Great knowledge. I just learned something today, right? Isn't that the goal? Always be better than you were the day before and learn new things. So, yeah, that's good to know. 90 days. So not even 90 days before the actual election, 90 days before the primary. So that's quite interesting. I'm glad to hear that. Who said that?
Scooch.
Scooch. Dave Savella. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Good stuff. He's a man who knows his politics.
Yeah. He knows very well. So last thing before we get on to NYPD is the ICE raids. ICE raids that have been happening across New York City. Christy Nome was in New York City yesterday morning, the early morning hours, along with a lot of other people, and they got one of the leaders, a gang leader, Trende Aragua. New York City politicians and New York State politicians are up in arms about this. I personally believe little scary times happening in New York, and I hope cooler heads prevail. Donald Trump and his administration are going after public safety threats. They're not going after the churro lady. They're not going after the ice lady. They're not ripping people out of the house and separating families and putting kids in cages. They're going after public safety threats. And the rhetoric that's coming out from the left in New York and New York City, politicians, especially on the left, is borderline treasonous. In my opinion, it is treasonous. We're hearing, we're gonna shelter, we're gonna hide. If you see ICE, call this one, do this. All of these things to work against the federal government. And I mean, it's crimes. It's felony crimes that politicians are actually pushing and saying out loud. And I just hope cooler heads prevail and they think about what they're actually saying. What do you think about the ICE raids? What do you think about what the politicians are saying?
I absolutely love what they're doing, and I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm not embarrassed to say it publicly. I love what ICE is doing at this point. I love the fact that Trump is doing it immediately with his administration, and that Holman has done this as to hit with shock and awe. I think that's what you need to do, right? You need to send a message, because make no mistake about it, this is not some small little crew, Tren de Aragua. These are not stupid people. And when I talk about stupid people, I'm talking about the leadership of this gang. This spreads through 8 countries in South America, and this has now spread throughout the entire United States. They've built themselves a network, and this is a network that actually could take on public safety. It could take on police departments throughout this country. This is a network that could actually give ICE a battle. Not just with boots on the ground, but through intelligence and through funding. This is a $15 million business. So the fact that they're doing this immediately with shock and awe, I think is outstanding. I think it's completely professional. I think strategically it's very intelligent. Hit them with shock and awe. And this complete misdirection that we hear from lefties and when it comes to ICE and these raids, and try to give this perception, right? We're talking about perception management, and they're actually trying to reverse the perception and give the perception that these ICE raids are just picking up Granny who's walking across the street, who's been in this country for 70 years. Is absolutely ridiculous. And John, I agree with you. It's almost criminal in the sense that you're betraying your own government. But it goes back, shout out to my brother Sal Greco, when he always says it's low-level politics that really has more of an effect on you. And it's true, because Donald Trump, really on the federal level, he's doing his job. I think he's hit with shock and awe, striking immediately, which you should do in any leadership position. And he's getting the opposition from local level politics. So really, we're going to see a battle of what's happened now on the state level and what's happened on the federal level. So this comes a time where no longer could you be a low information person. Another shout out to Sal Greco for saying that. And we can't have voter apathy. So right now we have to vote. When it comes time to vote, we have to vote people that are actually in line with what's going on with our federal level and actually want public safety. Because we don't have to have the state federal level moving in lockstep, but we all have to have the same mission. And the mission should be public safety, and that should be number one.
Yeah, but we have elected officials pushing nonsense that's not true, saying that, they're kidnapping people, they're doing this. I watched the press conference, the White House press secretary's press conference yesterday, and someone asked, how many of these people committed crimes? And she's like, well, all of them. And the press secretary's statement was big because it completely contradicted what NYPD Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch said. It said that, this is if you just cross the border, that's not a crime, that's a civil matter. And I'm like, nah, that's a pretty bad statement. And that was a memo that went out to NYPD police officers, and it's factually false. Actually, they are committing crime. They're committing a misdemeanor by being here, but that's not even who's being targeted here. Who's being targeted is public safety threats, gang members, terrorists, people involved in sex trafficking, people involved in the drug trade, people involved in the distribution of illegal firearms. And to see like the left up in arms about this and talk about fascism and about going to war and about standing in front of the Trump administration, I honestly would hate to see any of them locked up, but I don't think that they should not be held unaccountable because they're elected. I think if me and you were doing the same thing, Eric, we would be placed in handcuffs and put in a cell. And we would have to face severe penalties. So I hope you guys smarten up, because follow the law. That's all I'm saying. I'm going to give you the same advice that Eric Adams supposedly gave all the people in his administration that didn't follow the law. Follow the law.
Yeah, I think it's that simple, right? Follow the law, and especially when it comes to people that are in public service, politicians should be actually pushing for rule and law because they're the ones serving the public, not having the public serve them. I think you said it's treason. It's absolutely complete betrayal. Absolutely, it's treason. It's actually an act of terrorism, right? You're actually, when we talk about First Amendment speech, I think we talk about First Amendment speech a lot on this podcast, and there's definitely a fine line between First Amendment speech, hate speech, which and actually speech that's actually threatening and actually terroristic. And to me, this kind of speech here is an act of terrorism, an act of treason. No doubt about it. If John, you and I went online while we were employed with the NYPD, right, or employed with as a teacher, any type of organization, we'd be fired immediately. There's no doubt about it. We'd be fired immediately.
Well, I mean, we would be fired. I mean, I don't think they're breaking a law by saying what they're saying. I'm saying that they're breaking the law by doing what they're doing. If you're shielding public safety threats, if you're shielding, I mean, read the law, read federal immigration law. They could say whatever they like. You could be a Joe Borelli. You could say something and do absolutely nothing. You could be a David Carr and do that. That's not, I mean, they could say all of these things. I think it's wrong. I do, 100%. I think VS Ventura sent us some money. VS Ventura, shout out to you, $20 to the podcast. People are so brainwashed and stupefied by the media, public schools in Hollywood that they buy into the fear and lack a basic understanding of civics and how government is meant to work. Makes it easy to blind so many. Also, eliminates the income tax, aka legal theft. What started as a means to fund the Civil War, WW1, World War I, and World War II, has now become a permanent overreach. Nothing is so permanent as a temporary government program, right? Ronald Reagan, right? Ronald Reagan. It's true, man. It's like, people are blinded and we don't understand the laws. And when you hear politicians saying this and you know it's factually false, so it's like you're like, oh, why are they saying these things? Because other people don't know the law and now they believe what they're saying is accurate. Oh my God, Donald Trump is crazy. He's just deporting people. He's just pulling people out of their homes. And that's why it's important to have a free, fair, and balanced media and the ability to have open discussions and use your words. So crazy times we're living in, my friend. Crazy times.
That's why I must say I'm extremely disappointed in Jessica Tisch. She doesn't have a law enforcement background as far as boots on the ground. She worked with the NYPD on a technological level, and also a managerial level now. But she understands the work. She understands interlining politics, and she understands data. She talks about being data-driven, and she understands the law. She's a Harvard grad. There's no doubt about it. She knows the dichotomy. She knows the difference that when people cross the border illegally, that is a crime. We actually debunked the information actually put out. The time is impeccable of the information that Jessica Tisch has put out while Donald Trump is now the new elected president. And under Donald Trump, ICE is actually doing these raids and starting to remove some of the most violent perpetrators in this country, particularly in New York City, for public safety. So for Jessica Tisch, that's why I said for a long time, Jessica Tisch is going to tarnish her name. There's no doubt about it. She is going to be a patsy for Eric Adams because she now put herself in a position where she's tarnishing her name, she's tarnishing her appearance of intelligence, and she is tarnishing her name of integrity. She knows damn well that that's a crime. It's not civil. For her to actually have that operations order 4 for the NYPD, actually indicating that crossing the border illegally and remaining in this country is civil in nature, and putting the NYPD at odds with ICE is absolutely irresponsible and reckless. It goes along with this title that the executives of social media of the NYPD were irresponsible, but it's also irresponsible for Jessica Tisch. But it's also, again, the reason why I say she's a patsy, and a patsy is someone that takes blame, is that when this ship goes down, Eric Adams distanced himself from that. He could say it was the authority of the police commissioner, and she's the one who's going to take the blame for this complete mishap.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's she's a smart lady. Listen, I know she doesn't have a law enforcement background, but she graduated Harvard. She knows better. She knows better. You don't let your politics get in the way of of actually what the law is and of your profession. I never let politics get in the way of my career. I don't think anybody else should. I've worked hand in hand with people who politically don't align with me whatsoever, and we had great functioning working relationships. So I don't see how the law's the law. It's black and white for us, right? It's very simple for us. There's not really a gray area here. Here it is. Here's the law. And speaking of gray areas, so let's get into it. We got about 621 people on here this morning. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking about NYPD executives, or what we like to refer to them as politically appointed managers, because they're definitely far from leaders. Their social media posts were reviewed by Office of Inspector General, and they were deemed irresponsible and unprofessional. Eric, what do you think?
Well, first of all, this changes nothing because John Shell and Kaz Daughtry, in the face of the public eye, while acting at the height of being extremely unprofessional and irresponsible and reckless on social media, they were promoted. Kaz Daughtry was promoted to deputy commissioner from assistant commissioner, and now John Shell was promoted to chief of department. So what does this change? I mean, the fact that this DOI report comes out at this time, to me, means nothing at this point, because we have been sounding the horn on this for 2 years right now. And I'd say at the height of their unprofessionalism, started about a little bit over a year ago. John and myself at the finest Unfiltered, we were attacked. Our First Amendment speech was attacked on social media and other various forms besides social media. Our personal phone numbers through John Shell and Kaz Daughtry throughout the police department. Mike Colon, good friend to the podcast, who has his own podcast, New Haven Podcast. He was attacked on social media. Harry Siegel, numerous journalists. I mean, just the amount of unprofessional was so obvious and so blatant. It took this long to actually come out with this determination that it's irresponsible, unprofessional. Big deal. We already knew this. This is the obvious. So the question is, yes, they made this determination, which is so obvious. What is going to happen next? Will they be held accountable? And obviously not. John Shell was promoted to chief of department. Again, Kaz Daughtry was promoted. And Eric Adams, in the face of all this adversity, actually doubled down, and he supported John Shell and Kaz Daughtry. He supported their actions and actually tried to deflect and saying that they're supporting the rank and file. I think that this is just another opportunity to deflect and give the illusion that they'll be held accountable. But I don't think this changes anything. Business as usual.
Yeah, I think the OIG report, honestly, it's a slap in the face to the public. It's a slap in the face to me and you, to Mike Colon. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Jack, do me a favor. Could you bring up the report for everybody up on the screen? So this is a portion of the report, right? OIG NYPD reviewed all of the X posts made between January 22nd through August 24th for NYPD, the NYPD Chief of Patrol, John Shell, NYPD Kaz Daughtry, and NYPD News accounts, specifically identified in Speaker Adams' request, as well as posts of other individuals, including journalists and council members, to which these NYPD posts at the time were responding. OIG NYPD reviewed all of the NYPD social media policies as well as the citywide media policies, among other. OIG determined that NYPD social media policies and practices do not fully comply with the citywide policy, and the NYPD did not provide sufficient oversight of the posts made on executive accounts. The lack of compliance in particular, the absence of an internal approval process for executive accounts contributed in part to the NYPD's failure to ensure that the posts on its official executive accounts were courteous, accurate, and fully in compliance with relevant laws and regulations. Now, it's shocking to me that they reviewed those posts, the ones where they went after Harry Siegel, the posts where they went after Tiffany Caban, but the most unprofessional posts and the most unprofessional actions that were taken towards this podcast just slipped through the cracks. The posts where we're sending known criminals who they associate with, all of that stuff that happened on social media to us just goes by the wayside. I think, honestly, waste of taxpayer money. Whoever's in charge of this, Jocelyn Strauber, like I said a long time ago, the first person that comes in as the mayor needs to remove Jocelyn Strauber and needs to actually form a public integrity unit. It's also something that Jim Walden said that he's going to do. He's gonna put a public integrity unit in place of DOI and have it have some teeth to hold elected officials, NYPD officials, and other appointed managers accountable for their actions, because they are being held completely unaccountable. This is honestly, this pisses me off. Actually pisses me off.
You know, I'm liking Rob Lucas more and more. Shout out to you, brother. You did a great job on this podcast. Had a hell of an interview. Really getting to know him, because he calls it like it is. Let me tell you, here's a chief that was down to earth. NYPD executives fighting tweets and the media is both unprofessional and unnecessary. What happened to not getting hooked lead to a bad example to the rank and file? Absolutely. You're the leadership, right? You're supposed to set the example. Not only that, NYPD rank and file, the entire NYPD is supposed to have thick skin, right? Which is supposed to be the armor, right? Your armor when it comes to the Civilian Complaint Review Board, right? That's the whole premise, that when you deal with the public, that you're able to have thick skin and that you can actually be professional under duress. And yet, John Shell and Kaz Daughtry can't even handle a little criticism, and that's the chink in their armor. It's unbelievable. It's so ridiculous. And that's why I say, John, you say it's a slap in the face. I think this is a waste of taxpayer money. Obviously, they had to do something. They had all these complaints, but this is a complete waste of taxpayer money. They didn't talk about the big elephant in the room, which is this podcast, and they forgot to mention the encrypted messages by John Shell. How unprofessional that John Shell puts encrypted messages in his social media post. I could care less what they mean. He puts hashtag EDW, which means Eric Dimwit. I actually think it's funny. He puts hashtag BMS Warrior, which refers to you, John. But the point is, this is on a professional account who's for John Shell at the time was the chief of patrol. And now he was promoted. He was promoted to chief of department. DOI knew this is going on the entire time. You needed a full investigation to determine that these tweets are unprofessional. I mean, you could have figured that out in 30 seconds. Again, this is a waste of taxpayer money. This is a waste that they even actually have this report. It's absolutely ridiculous. But again, that's why I say, John, is there going to be any changes or business as usual? I highly doubt that Jessica Tisch is going to hold John Shell accountable for this. I mean, it's already done. The damage that John Shell and Kaz Daughtry have done, the relationships that have been destroyed between the upper echelon and the media has been completely deteriorated, especially Kaz Daughtry. When he had a shoving match with Rocco Parascadola, the actions that they have taken were supposed to be addressed then. That's one thing I tell you. I read numerous leadership books. That's my passion. And Colin Powell says it best. Discipline is supposed to be swift and immediate. And this is far too gone. They were supposed to take action. The NYPD, especially the police commissioners, the former police commissioners, who were completely useless, were supposed to take action when it was happening. But the damage has already been done. So even if they were supposed to be disciplined now, it wouldn't have the same impact. But if anything, they should be removed.
Yeah, I mean, it's this. I mean, but the problem is there literally is no oversight. So yeah, Kaz Daughtry attacks Rocco Parascandola in a press conference because Rocco wrote an article, and Kaz literally was like, "You like writing articles about me?" Like a child, like the child that he is. And then only a little while later, we have the DCPI attacking the police commissioner. So, and everyone's shocked, like, what's going on in the NYPD? What's going on in the NYPD is that we've appointed people who do not belong where they are. The NYPD is not a meritocracy. It's a swamp of nepotism. It's a swamp of people who are in positions that don't belong in the positions they're placed in. It's a swamp of it. They're not competent people. They've done nothing to deserve the position that they're in. You know, the famous thing that we play at the end of this, where Kaz Daughtry said we contributed nothing. I mean, if that's the case that me and you contributed nothing to the NYPD while we were there, then what's the truth about everyone that's in place currently at the NYPD? Because we contributed much more than all of them. So, I mean, that wasn't a knock on me or you. That was a knock on himself. Because, we've contributed nothing to the NYPD. Oh, wow. I've trained thousands of people. So have you, Eric. My legacy lives on. So does yours. in many and every place I touched, and even places I didn't, even just people I came across. Kaz Daughtry's legacy is going to be people didn't salute me quick enough. You know, you put out a post yesterday about guys being transferred, and you said, oh, how are these transfers determined? I know how they were determined. It was who dropped their salute the earliest. It's like they didn't hold the salute when John Shell or Kaz Daughtry walked past. They saluted real quick and dropped it, and they didn't like it. That's how it was determined who's going to get transferred to transit and who wasn't. You know, because was it actually that? No. But I mean, could it be that? Yeah, because we've seen it time and time again. One of the lieutenants I saw on there, I'm pretty sure, was already transferred from his command for not saluting somebody.
If that's the truth, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised at all. But you know what, John? You're actually wrong. You're actually wrong. We did have nothing to contribute, and we would have nothing to contribute to this administration because we're not involved in private contracts. We're not involved in crumbs. We're not involved in excessive amount of overtime. We're not involved in security details. We're not involved in appearance of impropriety. We don't have sexual allegations. So you know what, John, in his defense, we didn't contribute anything. And we wouldn't contribute anything to this administration because we're men of integrity. We wanted to do police work. They don't want to do police work. They want to enjoy the fruits of a criminal enterprise and use the NYPD as their own bank account and use the NYPD as their own playing field. So in that aspect, you know what? They're right. We got nothing to contribute. So for them, it's all about crumbs, right? And even Mikey G, metal detective Long Island, puts it out. Crumbs.
So listen to this report. So here's a little quote they put in here. We can disagree without being disagreeable. It takes courage to stick to your convictions, but it takes humility and wisdom to recognize the humanity of those who hold opposing views. Former United States Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. Listen to this. Listen to what they write below this, right? But use of social media can also heighten emotions and escalate conflicts, leading to disrespectful interactions might not occur in face-to-face conversations, thereby alienating individuals and groups and diminishing trust in government. Now, I agree, like that, you know, you could text me or I could text you, and we don't actually get the context of what we're saying. So I agree that your messaging on social media could be taken in a wrong manner because you don't see the mannerisms in which I'm saying it. And so I understand that things could be taken out of context. However, when we're talking about law enforcement officials and we're saying that this could heighten your emotions, escalate conflicts, if you can't handle your emotions because someone's disagreeing with you online on social media, or someone's in opposition to you on social media, or maybe someone's even saying something about you that you don't agree with. If you can't handle your emotions behind the safety of an iPhone, could we really trust that you could handle your emotions, handle your actions when your adrenaline's through the roof and you're out there interacting with the public? And now these interactions are actually very adversarial because they're in reality, in real life. I'm going to say right now that the two things correlate. If you can't handle your emotions behind the safety of an iPhone, you cannot handle your emotions on the street, which means if you cannot handle your emotions behind the safety of an iPhone, you have no business with a badge and a gun.
Spot on, brother. You know, again, shout out to Rob Lukash, right? Former chief, great interview. But we had a conversation when Rob Lukash was interviewed. He and I spoke because we were both present at the same riot in Mott Haven, June 4th, 2020 in the Bronx for these George Floyd riots. And we were both there. And we were talking, right? We had a quick conversation. We talked about how they were, the people in the crowd were throwing bricks, rocks. I even, at some point, you know, I think about this. I was thinking about it because, hey, Rob, if you're still watching, I remember I told you I lost 15 vacation days for getting on top of a car and striking someone with a baton that threw a stick at a cop and hit the cop in the head. And at the time, I got on top of the car because the riot, the people in the riot, the crowd was coming uphill, so we couldn't see what was in their possession. We see things being thrown, but we couldn't see where it was coming from. So I obviously couldn't find a ladder. So I was using the resources that were in and around me. So I got on top of the car. I knew that I could damage the car, but at that point, that's just a byproduct of it. The reality is we got to get to safety. I got on top of the car so I could get a better vantage point. And at that point, I could see that there was a couple of people in the crowd. They were trying to pick up a wheelbarrow out of someone's backyard to throw it at the cops. But I lost 20 vacation days. By the way, Rob, I looked it up because I said I lost 15, but I looked it up. I was, wow, I actually lost 20 vacation days. I lost 20 vacation days, and these clowns can't handle the emotions of what's going on social media. Absolutely ridiculous. And that's why he says lead by example. There is no example. These guys, it's more important for them to protect their egos, and it shows how weak they are. It shows how weak they are that they climb through the ladder, and these egotistical maniacs can't handle any criticism, can't handle any opposition online. How must they act in person? I can tell you right now, I know how they act because I speak to cops all the time. I speak to cops in different ranks, inspectors, and they tell me there's captains, John, and maybe things change now. It's kind of ironic that John Shell is the one that authorized the amendments to the vehicle pursuits for better for public safety, because there are captains that were terrified to actually call off vehicle pursuits because they're afraid of John Shell. I mean, this is what's going on in the police department. So listen, no surprise. But again, John, I lost 20 vacation days for taking action, and these guys have not been accountable because, and yet they have the thinnest skin possible. They're bums. Get them out.
Yeah, it's this report is the same thing with now. It's the same type of with the overtime. Oh, we're going to put overtime constraints in place. We don't need any new overtime constraints. They were always there. The system that we had worked. You just didn't follow it. So now we're just going to do new overtime constraints. Absolute joke, absolute joke. So listen to this. Listen to this statement. It is therefore critical that the government entities use social media respectfully and thoughtfully in order to foster understanding, dispel misinformation, and to diffuse conflict rather than intensify it. So here's my issue, right, with dispel misinformation. The biggest purveyors of misinformation the last 3 years has been every New York City agency. The NYPD has pushed out more misinformation in the last 3 years than a propaganda factory. It's absolutely ridiculous. Starting in 2020 all the way to now, these entities can no longer be trusted. So they're not the overriding authority of who's misinformation. So right then and there, this report does nothing because it's continuing on. We're there to dispel misinformation. Well, how about start by not pushing out misinformation? How about start by stop the whole crime is down propaganda narrative and start actually reporting the actual crime numbers? How about start by stop saying that you believe in civil rights and you believe in due process for all and tell everybody exactly who you are and what you think about Marlon Bethel and people like myself and why we don't deserve civil rights or why we don't deserve due process. Tell us who you are. So you're not going to dispel misinformation while you're pushing it. So, I mean, that's to me, when I read that line, I'm like, this whole report is being attacked and being written from such a biased, low intelligence, not well thought out view. It's like, no, you know what you're supposed to do? You're supposed to put out accurate information. You're supposed to be a professional. You're not supposed to dispel misinformation. You're not supposed to lower somebody's tensions. You're supposed to put out accurate information.
It's exactly that, John. There's 3 levels of government for checks and balances, and it was built on purpose, right, from our forefathers, right? The executive, judicial, and legislative branches, right, for checks and balances. And when it comes to law enforcement, your job is just to enforce the law. Let the media is a check and balance. The public is a check and balance on social media. And if there's going to be opposition to information by the police department, it's exactly that. Just put out the facts. Put out the facts and enforce the law. That's it. There's way too much engagement on social media. That's the other. Social media is a powerful tool. I agree. It's a powerful tool for this podcast. It's a powerful tool for our friends and listeners. It's a powerful tool for your voices to be heard. But when it comes to the police department, it also, as powerful of a tool as social media, can also be damaging. And I think it's far too many mouthpieces on social media for the NYPD, and it's far too much information and too much engagement. It should be just a source that people can actually reach out and communicate with law enforcement and actually get vital information in real time as another valuable source. Some people get their information by going online. Some people watch the news. Some people listen to the radio. And some people go on social media websites. And it should be that, a source of information, but way too much engagement. And this idea that they have to actually change perception, you don't have to change anybody's perception. You just have to give out the information. Here's the information. Here's the crime that's being reported. And here's our crime fighting plan. And other than that, thank you very much. End of day. But this idea that they have to be in a position to change people's mindsets and to sell this perception and to sell them perception versus reality and sell them this idea that crime is okay. It's way too much engagement on social media. And as powerful of a tool social media is, it's far more damaging. And it's damaging when you see that egotistical, inept, and inadequate and juvenile leadership is in a position to use social media as a weapon. Because that's what they did. They used social media as a weapon to torment the journalist, to torment Mike Cologne, to try to suppress this podcast. That's what they did. They utilized it and they weaponized it.
So over the past year, there have been complaints and reports that a small number of social media posts made by the NYPD or its executives have been aggressive, combative, and generally not conducive to a productive public discourse. So before we get into why that is, I think it's important to note that the posts that they've done have also been criminal because they've been doing it, misusing police resources to go out on social media, misusing overtime to go out on social media, and actually using it to threaten and intimidate not only the media, but independent voices, independent podcasts, right? They've been doing it to threaten and intimidate people like myself and Eric Dim to not continue to exercise our First Amendment right. That, people, is illegal. A law enforcement agency cannot threaten and intimidate you and seek to remove your First Amendment abilities for telling the truth, by the way. It's not even like if we were spreading lies, they could easily debunk those lies. Oh, no. The crime numbers that John put out are not factual because these are the actual crime numbers. Here you go. His statement's not factual because of this. It's not, there haven't been the most amount of NYPD officers that have left under any other administration in history. Here's the actual data. They don't do that. You know why? Because they're the ones that are lying. And they're breaking the law. And so then it leads to the question, why are these posts combative and unprofessional and childish and illegal, which this report leaves out? Why is that? Eric, why do you think social media posts from NYPD executives, and let's call them who they are, Tariq Shepard, Kaz Daughtry, John Schell, why do you think that these posts are unprofessional, egotistical, illegal?
Well, for the most part, these posts, and again, I talk about having too many mouthpieces on the NYPD. And the reason why we have too many mouthpieces is because we don't have an actual pyramid of proper leadership, because we have people that were promoted by rocket fuel into the positions that they're in. And they didn't go through the proper channels to be in leadership. They weren't properly trained in leadership, and they're not in these positions because they're appointed, because they're the best suitable. They're there because of nepotism. And nepotism equates to corruption. So because they're insecure in their positions, because they were promoted by rocket fuel and they're not actually deserving of these positions, they act out in insecurity. So a lot of this comes out of their insecurity and their egos. There's no doubt about it. It's completely unprofessional. When you're in a position of leadership and you go through the grind, and you understand leadership and you actually be trained in it, you should become stoic and you should remain professional, especially when you're supposed to lead by example. That's one of the most key fundamentals of being a leadership is leading by example. And there is no example when it comes to the upper echelon. And you know what? We see the effects of it, not just in social media, John. We see the effects of it, how it's stemmed throughout the entire police department. John and myself were actually recently on a show called Crowdsource the Truth. If you have an opportunity, the host of that, his name is Jason, great guy. And he talks about the unprofessionalism by the NYPD. And he actually gives you an example that was actually filmed where he had an interaction on the phone with a cop that was kind of, humiliating him. He was at the scene, at one of these migrant hotels in Midtown South, and where he's just completely berated by the police department. It was completely unprofessional. And he wants that police officer, whoever he spoke to, held accountable. And I said, I agree. But how do you hold that person accountable, John? How do we hold that detective that was being unprofessional with Jason from Crowdsource the Truth when the entire upper echelon is far more egregious? Again, they set the example. So how do we hold that person example where his unprofessionalism doesn't even touch what's going on here on social media? But again, it shows that we have people that lack the ability to be in the positions that they are. They're there by nepotism. They're there by cronyism. They're promoted by rocket fuel. John Shell, yes, he went through the grind, but he, as far as moving up the ladder and taking these tests, but as far as I'm concerned, his career should have ended in 2008 when he took the life of another and said it was an accidental discharge. So for me, he's there by nepotism and cronyism also when it comes to Eric Adams.
Oh, I mean, he rode Jeffrey Madry's coattails, and I don't think anyone denies that. And he says it himself that Jeff Madry is his mentor and good friend. And he, I don't think that he denies it at all. That he rode Jeffrey Madry's coattails all the way up, and Jeff Madry didn't deserve to be in the position he was in. And I think ultimately the reason that these social media posts are unprofessional, they break numerous laws, whether it be the Hatch Act, where you can't electioneer, which John Shell did by telling people not to vote for Tiffany Caban using an official government account, to call journalists anti-police, call Harry Siegel. What do you call him? Harry, what the hell was it?
Oh, I'm trying to remember. By the way, I like Harry, dude. I just want to say I like Harry. I actually, you know what? I know there's a lot of stuff. What's that?
Harry Deceitful Siegel.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. I like Harry, man. Tell you what, listen, there's some stuff that he says in opposition to police, but if you really look at it, he's actually calling out the leadership. I don't see him calling out the rank and file. So that, to me, that was another indication it's protecting their ego, because the stuff that Harry Siegel was addressing was actually towards the leadership. His criticism was actually towards the leadership. So they responded, of course, and they showed their weakness by responding. So again, I like Harry. Shout out to Harry Siegel.
Yeah, so I like Harry too. So he was calling him Harry Deceitful Siegel. Harry messed up on one article and he quickly corrected it. They were attacking Harry after Jonathan Diller's funeral, saying that Harry put out this report that was knocking the rank and file of the NYPD, when in fact it wasn't. And they were saying how disrespectful it was to Jonathan Diller and how they couldn't control their emotions because they had just lost a brother. And, the thing is, but the truth of the matter is Harry Siegel writes his Sunday column in the Daily News. So every Sunday he puts out a column. That was the story he was working on that week, and that's what he put out on Sunday. And they painted it out to be this anti-police report, when in fact, I mean, it was an article. It was a news article. I didn't know that, that we weren't allowed to, people in the media weren't allowed to discuss certain topics in law enforcement during sensitive times. This is first. Because this is New York City. We've had horrible things happen before and reports come out during them, while they're happening, after them. And again, it just showed the complete immaturity and lack of intelligence that these people have. And I think the reason that you see all of this unprofessionalism, you see this like horrible, really portrayal of the NYPD is because That's who these people are. That's who was appointed by the NYPD. That's who was appointed to run the NYPD. I continuously say it over and over again. Somebody is going to agree with me at one point. Watch the movie Goodfellas and then imagine that Paulie wins the mayoral election and he appoints all of the dirtbags in Goodfellas to run New York City and run the New York City Police Department. And then you don't think the social media is going to be unprofessional and they're going to attack people and they're going to try to shake down people and they're going to intimidate witnesses and there's going to be sexual complaints against these people. That's what we did. We took all the neighborhood dirtbags. We took the worst and dumbest people and we put them in charge of vital agencies in New York City. That's the Eric Adams administration. That's the Crumbs administration. You took all of your neighborhood dirtbag friends and you put them in charge of everything, including the NYPD. And then everyone's shocked by this. And all they're doing is with these stupid reports is honestly, they're wasting millions of dollars in taxpayer money because they're doing nothing to correct any of this because the same people remain in place.
At Alva 91 put pawns. You're absolutely right. Pawns. There's no doubt about it. Listen, we are almost an hour into it. We're going to keep going, of course. I just want to say, got a hell of a lineup today. We're covering the news. We talk about the mayor stepping down, the new minority leader of city council, ICE raids, and, of course, these NYPD clowns. So like, share, and subscribe at this point. We appreciate our friends and listeners. Some great comments here. Get a lot of vital information. Yeah, the bottom line is unprofessionalism on social media is so juvenile by the upper echelon, the police department. But again, I believe what I read when it comes to Colin Powell and other leadership books, that discipline should be swift and immediate. That was the time to take action. But obviously, we didn't have any sitting police commissioners that actually had any authority under the behest of Eric Adams. The action was supposed to be taken immediately to actually have an impact, not only on the upper echelon, but send a message throughout the entire police department that we're going to have a professional vision and a professional representation of the NYPD, and it's not going to be tolerated. So the fact that this report now comes out, I would say about 2 years too late, really has no impact. It's a waste of taxpayer money. There's a lot of word salad in here. A lot of stuff that honestly just really doesn't need to be addressed. It doesn't need a full out extensive report. It shouldn't be addressed. It should have just been addressed immediately. Common sense will tell you to remain professional. You're a law enforcement representative. But one thing, I hope that one thing comes out of this, there's just far too many mouthpieces on social media. And your emotions should not be revealed in these social media posts. Ron Layson addressed it here, talks about stuff that he would post. John, you had talked about posting and ghosting. Rob Bluecash gave you a shout out for that. And that's pretty much what you should do. Post it and have less engagement. Far too much engagement by the upper echelon where they're allowing their emotions to get involved. But again, the reason why, and that's why I say what's different about this administration and this upper echelon, the reason why that they're actually getting involved in social media is not to propel public safety and not to get a message out there. They're utilizing social media to protect their egos, to protect this criminal enterprise, to protect the information that's actually been exposed about the appearance of impropriety, which is no longer an appearance. It's actual just straight up corruption that's coming up the upper echelon. So for a long time, I have to admit, I thought it was just protecting their egos, but it's far more sinister. It's cover and concealment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing My Visual Zone just brought up. I'm not going to agree with your first part, My Visual Zone. Before I get to you, I just want to say someone asked, who's Kaz? Is it Henry Hill? No, Kaz wasn't in this movie. Kaz is Fredo. I'm smart. That's not what I wanted. That's who Kaz is. He's Fredo.
He doesn't make it to part two.
Yeah, he doesn't make it to part two. But so My Visual Zone says, at the end of the day, Shell and Kaz lost. I don't agree with you at all. They lost their tweet privileges. That's not losing. Sorry. They're commanding very high salaries and apparently making overtime while do it illegally.
What did they lose? Lose?
I don't know. I don't know what he means by that, or she. I don't know. They've been neutered. No, they have not. They're controlling the NYPD. So I don't agree with. But he says this. This is the key thing I wanted to bring out here. The press is back at the shed in 1PP. So under Tariq Shepard's reign of Deputy Commissioner of Public Information, while he was attacking people like Craig McCarthy, cursing him out, on the other, acting unprofessional, attacking the police commissioner, while they were going after Rocco Parascandola, removing press passes of Tina Moore and other notable reporters in New York City. They actually kicked all of the reporters out of One Police Plaza and put them in a trailer. And they said this was being done for construction purposes, or it was being done to give them more space, when really it was just being done to screw with them. So they wasted more taxpayer money to screw with the media because they were unfond of how they were being portrayed in the media, because the media was reporting what was happening in the administration, which was absolutely disgusting, which showed that none of them should be in the positions that they were in. So now that there is some, I won't say fully, but there's a little adult leadership returning to the One Police Plaza. The new head of DCPI, I don't remember her name right off the bat on top of my head, but guess what? She has moved the press back into One Police Plaza. What do you think about that?
That's the part to highlight here, right? The narrative was controlled. There was complete intimidation towards journalists under this administration, right? This administration did a great job of trying to control the media, which in the media shouldn't control politicians either. But should be checks and balances where the media and the public holds our politicians and holds the administration accountable. And how they hold them accountable? By asking questions, getting vital information out there. But this administration pretty much locked out the media. And I think that we really exemplified it. And we see it when it comes to encryption radios. John, you and I both were adamant and expressive about the encryption radios where, hey, we understand there may be a component of it when it comes to safety. But if you look at the years in the history of the police department and the utilization of radios, they were never encrypted. We had some encrypted channels. And I think I don't think this encryption radios, I don't think changes or has any impact of safety. Actually, the cops are actually in a far more dangerous position that they're in right now. We're seeing cops attacked at an alarming rate. It's become a new phenomenon. And that's what the encryption radios, right? We were sold this gaslighted that this idea that the encryption radios is for public safety, when in fact it's not. It's just shutting out the media. The media can't even respond. I mean, look, we had here yesterday, if anybody has an opportunity, if you missed it, our friends and listeners, we had an interview yesterday of Hakeem Gibson, right, who has the page Perception of Law Enforcement. And even he said that there's a lot of crime scenes, a lot of opportunities to take photos and put out journalistic information. When it comes to crime scenes, it was missed because of encryption of radios. And that's what the key point is. That's what this administration wanted to do, and that's what they accomplished. They accomplished actually shutting out the media. So again, this administration is just an epic fail, protecting their egos and control the narrative. Who says it best? Marlon, perception management. That's what this comes down to. And John, you know what? It's just people like you, people like myself, our friends and listeners here. We're not buying it, and we're going to fight back. And we utilize social media. We fought back, but we're private citizens. We have a First Amendment right to do this. And do they have the First Amendment? Absolutely. No doubt about it. You and I both agree there should be First Amendment. But when you're in a position and you're working for law enforcement, you're in a leadership position, and you're kind of between the rank and file and the public, you are supposed to be the voice of reason. You are supposed to be the cool head. You are supposed to be professional.
Yeah, someone's bringing up viral news of close connections with Shell and Kaz. So we believe that there are lines that New York City taxpayers are paying for to fund propagandists, such as viral news, because he's furthest thing from a news or media outlet. He is a paid propagandist, in my opinion. He's paid one way or the other, whether it's through favors or money. But I personally believe it's through money. And, you know, we're looking into that, and we're seeking proof of that. Not only are there influencers or propagandists that are being paid by New York City government, but there are also media outlets that are being paid. And we're looking into that. We don't have everything's just allegations now, but we are looking into that. And if that's the case, that's something that needs to be known. And hey, it may even be your favorite conservative news channels that these people are going on that are actually being paid for these appearances. So I don't think, I think taxpayers would be pretty unhappy if they learned that the media tour that Shell and Kaz were going on was costing you millions and millions of dollars. So we don't know that yet, but whatever happens in the dark usually comes out in the light. So we will learn. So they highlight this one part of the Shell's tirade on social media. They never highlight in this whole report. They don't highlight his drunken tirades either, where he's out, past 10 o'clock, wherever he was out having some cocktails. They don't highlight any of this, but they highlight this one: the judge's decision to not jail, arrest pending trial. On February 27, 2024, Chief Shell posted an X about a New York State criminal judge decision to not incarcerate a particular arrestee who was arrested on felony charges. Chief Shell stated in the post, the NYPD and the district attorney did their jobs, but the arresting and charging the person, but the Honorable Judge Sweeting failed to do her job by releasing a predator back in the community who may be on your next train or walking on the streets of New York City looking for his next victim. Here, Chief Shell accused an acting New York Supreme Court judge of failing to do her job, when in fact he simply disagreed with a decision she made in professional capacity. He also suggested that she would be responsible for future acts of violence by the defendant had he be released, an inflammatory and speculative allegation in light of recent threats of violence and acts of violence against judges. Naming and criticizing individual justice and claiming that the justice has created a safety risk to the community could potentially put the justice at risk of harm. Chief Shell told the office that he posted the statement and others with similar messages about recidivists being released on bail because he thought it was a public safety issue and he wanted to know the consequences of the judge's decisions. The office identified at least 2 additional posts by Chief Shell about recidivism. So that was one that he did, but he also did another post where he named a judge and it wasn't even the right judge. What do you think about him calling out the judge's decisions? Good, bad, indifferent? What do you think about it?
Well, again, that's his First Amendment. That's his First Amendment right. So I'm not against his First Amendment right, but I am against him doing it on the professional social media platform. I'm completely opposition to it. It should have been saying, well, hey, Judge so-and-so has a track record of, in the last 6 months, of having such and such cases. Here are the results. Here's what we're seeing, and here's how we're going to combat it. Here's our crime fighting strategy with the legislation that we're dealing with. Something in those manners, in that manner, because it's completely professional, and you're addressing it, but you're addressing it the same way. It's like the Art of War. We always talk about the book, The Art of War. Not showing your hand completely, but to me, his actions were just completely emotional, and it showed. It appeared to be some type of drunken stupor. It was so unprofessional. The mannerisms that he attacked it was unprofessional. I understand challenge it, but challenge it with facts. Show the data. Jessica Tisch talks about being data driven. Show the data behind it. Show the results of the actions of the judge, and show the comparison of how the police department intends to maintain public safety. Justin A, shout out to you, $10 coffee and donuts, says, I recently found your YouTube channel and really enjoy the vids. Thanks for your work. Do you guys know anyone on New York State Park Police and what it's like for them? Port Authority Police Department and MTA applications aren't open yet. Listen, it's kind of off topic, but so if you want, reach out to John and myself at www.defianceunfiltered.com. We could definitely give you some information about police departments out there. We appreciate that you tuned into the YouTube channel, and I hope you enjoy the show and the episode with the topics that we're talking about now. With that being said, our friends and listeners, anybody out there, please like, share, and subscribe. But John, those are my thoughts. What do you think about as far as when I say that it give the data to actually combat the opposition?
So, and I think, first off, I think that Shell, Daughtry, and Tariq Shepard took to social media to try to mimic myself and you, and to, put out information to combat the misinformation that's going out. Unfortunately, in order for them to combat it, I believe they put out a lot of misinformation, and they gave a lot of opinion about what they're doing. So like this post by John Shell just shows he's not that intelligent. His posts show that. He's not much of a leader. And, while, yeah, you could say whatever you want, it's not a crime what he did naming the judge. I mean, it shows that he's a moron because he named the wrong judge. But doing it on social media on a public account, on an organization's account, and doing it on behalf of the NYPD, he should 100% be disciplined, at least receive 30 days and a year probation, like anyone else would that posted something like this. This is not his own personal account. He's not a forced retired member of the service, so he should stop acting like one. So I think that's the first thing. And the other thing is he didn't even really he wasn't penalized for what he did. He's putting out inaccurate information. He's attacking a judge's decision. He's putting all of his own opinion about that decision out there. And then later that day, NYPD DCPI posted a statement claiming that they had received inaccurate information about the identity of the judge, but that despite their error, they stand firm in our belief that judges need to be held accountable for their decisions. So I guess Shell's holding people accountable, but nobody's holding Shell accountable. So Shell reposted, facts matter, but the story does not change. Now listen to the leadership here, Eric. Listen to what a leader sounds like. If a sergeant did this, I would say they were the furthest thing from a sergeant. But this wasn't a sergeant. This is now a 4-star chief. He was a 3-star chief when he said it, but now he's the highest uniform ranking member of the service. Insanity. Zero leadership. This is the exact opposite of extreme ownership. You ready? You ready for this one? I was given incorrect information through numerous verifications as to which judge released the individual. My post, my responsibility. With that, an apology is owed to the Honorable Judge Michelle Sweeting. What do you think about that? I was given incorrect information through numerous verifications. Did that need to be brought up, or is that a deflection?
Well, there's no surprise, right? We see it particularly with Jeffrey Madry, where he had a full press conference with his attorney blaming everyone else. Boo-hoo. Oh, poor guy. He's only the chief of the department. He didn't know about excessive overtime. He didn't know he's just in charge of operations. Oh, poor guy. Blaming everybody else. So who's his mentor? Jeffrey Madry. So where did he learn? He learned from Jeffrey Madry saying, oh, it was the guys below me that gave me bad information. That's why I put it out there. My bad. These are not leaders. A true leader would say, you know what? I take full responsibility for this mishap, and going forward, I learned from it, and it won't happen again. That's a true leader. But what do we expect? The reason why these social media posts are actually engaged and they sound unprofessional because they come from a place of emotion. They have zero emotional intelligence when it comes to this leadership. And to be an effective leader, you have to have an IQ for emotional intelligence, and that means not getting hooked and not getting in these emotionally invested in these type of conversations, not only in social media, but in person. You're supposed to be stoic. We talk about stoicism, right? We talked about stoicism with Jim Walden when we had an interview here with Jim Walden, and we all agree that stoicism is a real key element and a great characteristic trait to have in leadership. And I mentioned to John Shell, I responded to him numerous times and said, you need to remain stoic. This sounds so unprofessional. But they have no signs of it because this comes from a place of insecurity. That's why they act out. Because people that are competent and confident don't act in this manner. But again, his mentor was Jeffrey Madry. So they're all following this. They're all moving a lockstep. They all move the same way because they all learn from the same school. They all, John Shell learned from Jeffrey Madry. And with all his unprofessionalism, you actually can look at it and say, you know what? He wasn't disciplined. He was actually promoted for it. He is the highest uniform ranking member of the New York City Police Department. How can we expect any professionalism throughout the entire police department when the highest ranking member, these are his actions. And not only these actions are in person, where some people may have witnessed it and some not. This is documented and everyone witnessed it and everyone sees the unprofessionalism, and it stems throughout the entire department. That's why I say this is damaging, John, and this needs to be fixed and rectified a long time ago. This is $1 late, $1 short.
Yeah. So Pat Donahue says the reason they don't use their personal social media accounts is because without their job titles, their opinion would be inconsequential and gain no traction. And that's 100% what it is, because their opinion is the lowest resolution thinking possible. It doesn't sound like someone who's even would have attained the higher ranks of NYPD leadership. It doesn't sound like someone who was even an NYPD sergeant or a detective or a cop. It sounds like someone who's not really using their brain. And I agree with you. And that's why it gets no traction. And that's why, I continuously say they need that job. They need it. So another time Chief Shell that they highlight is when he goes on the Breakfast Club. And so there was I believe she's a lawyer, Oliemi Olorian. So Olorian posted clips of an interview on her X account, at least which garnered more than 3 million views. Chief Shell reposted the post using divisive and hostile language towards Miss Olorian. He mocked her self-description as a movement lawyer and claimed she epitomized everything that true New Yorkers opposed. So he speaks. He's in fact going to say who's a true New Yorker and who isn't. Got it. He described her as a misinformed person and suggested community boards and block associations disagree with her stance. So now he speaks for all the community organizations. Got it. He ended the post with "talk soon," apparently promising additional and likely hostile interaction with her via social media. What'd you think about this? I remember this interview with Solorian. Like, what'd you think about this and Shell's posts?
Again, more of the same, just completely unprofessional. But it's just so juvenile. It's something that shouldn't happen from a professional account. Again, just address the law, address the rule of law, show what you're doing out there. Hey, listen, your NYPD conducted so many enforcement raids, conducted so many warrants. This is a crime-fighting strategy. But to engage in this manner, it's again, they have zero emotional intelligence. John, you and I talked about this. First of all, she beat the hell out of them on the Breakfast Club, and it was a bloodbath. But no reason for John Shell to respond to it, so he could. Oh, look, Eric, look, I have your back. I have your back. Come on, are you going to have his back when he doesn't get a pardon and he's headed to the feds? Is John Shell going to have his back then? You'll see how quick he turns his back.
No, he's going to have his back. He's going to have his back the same way Jeffrey Madry's back, his mentor. He's going to have it. Eric, he's going to be there for you, bro. He's going to be there. He's going to be there. He's going to be behind you, way behind you. Kissing the new man's ass, kissing Giovanni's ass, or whoever else comes in. That's where he's gonna be. No, dude, it wasn't me. It wasn't me.
Exactly. Stephen S. says it here. Do the job and let the public see. Right? Just show the work. John, just show. How hard is that? Just show the work. If it's that good, why do you even have to say anything?
I don't. And that's the bigger thing of all of it. Why are you even on social media? Why are you're the chief of patrol. You're in charge of about 20,000 cops. What are you doing worried about what John McCarry, Eric Dim, Solorian, or anyone else is tweeting or writing about? What do you care? What are you doing all day at work? Is this what you're doing? Oh, you believe what this guy said to me? You believe this? You believe this stuff? I can't believe it. It's like, that's what you're doing, dude. You know how often I looked at social media when I was a cop? Never. I didn't care. Did you read the paper? Yeah, people read the paper, right? What do you care? You don't need to respond to it. If something's factually inaccurate, respond to it. Heavy is the head. You're in the public eye. People are going to criticize. If you're doing your job, you're not going to care. You're not going to care. Obviously, you're not doing your job. That's why you care. So it's a joke. And then, so Oliemi blocks the chief of patrol's official account because he's trolling her, right? So I mean, this is like something that like social media influencers do. Or like I do it. You do it, Eric. When you're blocked, if you're having a conversation with someone, a dialogue, and they block you, like Richie Torres did to me or somebody, I show it. Like, look what a coward this person is. They don't, they talk to me about debate or they talk to me about leadership, and then they're not there. And they don't they don't want to engage in a civil, respectful debate with you. Oh, and by the way, SBA unblocked me. I don't know what happened. I don't know what it was. Someone sent me a post. I was like, I didn't even click on it because I figured it would go to block. And then I clicked it by accident, and I was actually allowed to see it. It didn't say block, nothing. So shout out to the SBA for unblocking me. If we could just let us know what we did to earn that honor.
I got to check. I didn't even know they had blocked you. I got to check because I've been blocked too. I'm actually going to check right now.
Yeah, I was like, what the hell? So,
I got to find out. This is
weird. Maybe we're in the good graces of the unions again. I don't know.
They must have loved our podcast talking about their protest outside the Apollo Theater.
Yeah. So so after Chief Shell posted this, Miss O'Lorian blocked him on X. In response to being blocked, Chief Shell posted just what I thought. And dared Miss O'Lorian meet me in Massapequa tomorrow morning at Detective Diller's funeral, referring to him as the very man you dismissed today. Chief Shell may disagree with Miss O'Lorian's decision to de-emphasize the killing of Detective Diller and highlight the killings of police officers, but to use his official account to target and diminish her does not correct misinformation, rebut criticism of the department, or further productive dialogue with members of the public. It is therefore inappropriate to use his official account and could be interpreted as an effort to intimidate her for challenging the mayor's approach to policing and public safety, or to send a message to others who might share her views. That's about the only thing that they got right in this report, is that's exactly what all of this was being done. This was a bully tactic to intimidate people from giving their views, not only against the NYPD, but the mayoral administration. Because that was his thing. They hate this administration. What do you care, dude? You're the chief of patrol. Do your job. You're the chief of department. Do your job. How about maybe go to your mentor and say, hey, listen, I want to have an intervention with you. I notice your door's closed a lot, and I notice this girl's making a lot of overtime, and I'm going to do you a favor, and I'm going to see that you don't go to jail and you don't do anything. Why don't you stop whatever the hell you're doing? Why don't you stop allowing millions of dollars in taxpayer funds to be misused? Oh, you know why he didn't do that? Because the same shit was going on in his office.
Well, it's obvious also that the NYPD still has an extreme amount of influence. Because clearly to me, that with this DOI report, that the NYPD has some influence on actually what direction it's going in. Because somehow the big elf in the room, this doesn't address what's going on with the Finest Unfiltered, John. It doesn't address the attacks on this podcast at all. And isn't it ironic? I mean, we did make an allegation through internal affairs. We haven't been secret about it. We've been pretty public about it. It's been over a year we've been stonewalled by the police department, by Group 1 of Internal Affairs. And yet we've made numerous allegations that included corruption, included criminality. It also included violating the social media policy by John Shell and Kaz Daughtry. And yet, none of this information is in this DOI report. I don't think it's a coincidence. I tell you what, I don't think it's a coincidence at all.
Yeah. Pat Donahue says the use of a line of duty funeral as a backdrop for a social media bully campaign is disgraceful and the telling of the insecurity of some of the anointed. And that's, they use Diller's death, they use Diller's murder, They use his murder and his funeral to deflect any criticism of them. But what they do traditionally is they use the work of the rank and file of the NYPD to deflect any criticism of them. And that's what they do because, like you said, their insecurities on full display. So now people are going to say, why did Chief of Patrol John Shell get promoted to the chief of department after being involved in numerous corruption scandals and after acting like a child online? So I'm going to explain it to you right now. And this post should tell you everything as to why he's now the chief of department. It's going to completely debunk the fact that Jessica Tisch appointed him the chief of department. And it's going to highlight that, in fact, Eric Adams appointed him to the chief of department. So Somebody, Chris Evans, retweeted the Oliemi Solorian interview on the Hot 97 Club where Eric Adams was there. Chris Evans wrote, "Woo, she packed Eric Adams all the way up with the receipts." To which Tiffany Caban, socialist, known cop hater, known far left extremist, in my opinion. I don't agree with Tiffany on anything. I maybe once in a blue moon we agree, but but so she retweets, and all she retweets is, and she said some stuff that I'm like, wow, that's bad, and I've went at her a little, but all she tweeted was Pew. PHEEEWWW. Pew. That's all she did. She retweeted what Chris Evans said. Does not call for a response. Does not call for anything. But Chief John Schell must have infuriated him. He wasn't able to control his emotion because social media is a place where, he's going to work perfect out there in the street and under high stress situations and be able to control, thousands of people and crime situations and run crime scenes, but he can't control his emotions on social media. So he retweeted Tiffany Caban and he writes, "Pew, under this mayor's leadership, we have saved over 700 people being shot in the city. Pew, under this mayor, thousands of gun arrests protecting our most vulnerable communities. Pew, under this mayor, crime is down while fighting the ridiculous policies that your friends put in place and he inherited. Policies hurting everyday New Yorkers in our city. TikTok, as I travel through the city and spend time doing media just about every day, the community always asks me what we can do to help. And I always say to all New Yorkers, if you want change, vote the change you seek. Be well." And that, my friends, is a violation of the Hatch Act, where you cannot electioneer as a government employee, and that's exactly what he did.
I gotta laugh. I remember when that first came out. And that's my point, John. The fact that there wasn't swift and immediate action in response to that post by John Schell from the police commissioner, Eric Adams, is an epic fail. That's a failure. That's why discipline has to be swift and immediate to have an impact. It should have been an impact on John Schell, and it would have been a message for the entire NYPD to remain professional. Now, what he said, it's all kind of juvenile. Do I agree with Tiffany Caban? No, she's a complete wacko. She's a complete leftist. But the same token, she has a right to First Amendment speech. That's why we took an oath as law enforcement, took an oath and also in the military, because we believe in the Constitution. I believe that Tiffany Caban, as much of a wacko she is and how polarizing her statements are, she has a right to her statements. She has a right to it. So for John Schell to go on this drunken tweet, and that's exactly what it is, because no sober person or a sound mind, especially in a leadership position, would have the response that he has. But why even respond? I think that's ultimately the point. If you're stoic and you're professional and you're competent in your abilities and competent in the police department, competent in the upper echelon, why would you even respond? And that's the problem. He easily got hooked, right? You always learn in the police department, don't get hooked. Imagine him on the street. Well, we know how he handled it on the street. 2008, he took someone's life by an accidental discharge. This is the response of someone that gets emotionally invested. He can't even handle himself online. How is he going to handle himself in the public? I feel sorry. I got to tell you right now, I feel sorry for the people that work for him. It must be a miserable and hostile environment. And we've heard all the grumblings and the scuttlebutt about the environment under John Schell. But clearly, it's so reflective and exposed right there. And the other element to that is exactly what you and I were talking about. Especially in the upper echelon, you're supposed to remain apolitical. To be political engineering in your position, he doesn't even realize how powerful those words are, especially when you're at the point when you're the chief of patrol of the NYPD. Powerful and damaging. But it's an epic fail. This is by people that are just completely idiotic. Rob Lukash says pure arrogance and inappropriate conduct. Absolutely. Completely arrogant. John Schell is arrogant. And with arrogance comes insecurity and comes egotistical maniacs. These are maniacs. This is not normal people. Normal people in their position would value the position he's in. Thank God you're in a position of leadership. Thank God you could do so much good for the rank and file in the public out there and having these stupid pissing matches, because that's all it is, John. It's just a pissing match.
Yeah, absolutely. Sparky said Sid Rosenberg has thrown his support behind Frank Morano. Frank Morano responded yesterday. He supports reinstatement of city workers who were fired over the mandate. So good job, Frank. Hope to see you on here. We'll explore some more of his stuff. So what was I going to say? Oh, I completely lost my train of thought. All right. There's 969 people on here. Thanks, everybody, for joining us this morning. If you guys could just do us a favor, if you could like the space, if you could share it out, if you could subscribe to the channel, if you're on YouTube or Rumble, we appreciate you. For those of you that are listening on Apple or Spotify or any of those other platforms, if you could subscribe on those platforms, leave us a review. Even the negative reviews, I actually love the negative reviews more than I like the positive ones, and we share those out often. So, definitely get on that. We got a hard out at 10 o'clock, so we're going to go another 25 minutes on here about. Let's go further into this report. So a news article came out about like I said, about crime stats in the subway. Harry Siegel had to do a retraction. So there was a retraction done, and the Daily News corrected his story. I believe he said that there were like 10 homicides when there were only 4. Something like that. I don't know the exact numbers, but Chief of Patrol John Schell, after Deputy Commissioner Operations Kaz Daughtry had called Harry a gadfly, which I have to look that up because I don't even know what that is. But so Chief of Patrol retweeted now the Deputy Commissioner Operations, and he said, "Oh, Harry, you had to make the retraction on something as simple as homicide stats? ? We all make mistakes. Been there myself. Yeah, like when you gave the wrong judge. Your timing on this article, plus you mainly write for the city, clearly demonstrate the overall disdain for the NYPD." So he's labeling the city as an anti-police paper. And
What a moron.
The very cops, and he did that solely based upon the work, I believe, of Yoav Gonen when he highlighted the failure in the policy of letting young rookies, untrained rookies who were being led by low integrity bosses that had high integrity conflicts that probably shouldn't even be on the job, lead these young men and act like they were playing Dukes of Hazzards on the streets in New York City. So that's why he hated the city, because they showed the hypocrisy and the stupidity of John Schell's crime fighting mission of just crashing vehicles around New York City and no one going to jail anyway. So the very cops that protect the community where your ivory tower is located, so Harry lives in an ivory tower, the defund crowd who will cry boo-hoo to 911 when they need us. The problem is that besides your flawed reporting is the fact you are now calling that now we are calling you and your latte friends out on their garbage. So he's calling Harry a latte liberal, when in fact he's rolling around with the biggest latte liberal there is, Eric Adams, with his fancy suits. Well, get your popcorn ready. We are having a strong platform too. Lastly, you're upset about not mentioning the January crime spike in transit, ? Fair enough. But if crime is down in transit, will you report on it, ? Or will your hypocrisy and your editors not allow honest reporting? Be well. What a loser.
That's a bum right there. Get that bum out. Again, I can't say it enough. This should have been addressed then and there. It's $1 late and $1 short. It doesn't have the same impact. If it actually gets addressed now, I can tell you right now, I foresee it's not going to get addressed. He was awarded the chief of department in the face of adversity while the unprofessionalism was at the height of it, when John Schell's having pissing matches with journalists, Kaz Daughtry's in a shoving match with Rocco Pascadol. Ultimately, he was awarded and rewarded. He was never disciplined, and he's not going to be disciplined now. This is just a complete waste of time. This is stuff that we already know. Did they need this full investigation to look at that social media post and like, really? You can close your eyes and open them and go, whose 10-year-old kid just wrote this social media post? That's if it didn't have the name John Schell, if it didn't have a picture on it. John, you were looking at that, or any of our friends and listeners, you would think, was this written by a teen? You wouldn't think this is written by a grown man who carries a firearm, who runs the most iconic and largest police department in the entire country. John, right? If you close your eyes, would you imagine, hey, I didn't have the name on it, it didn't say John Shell, that this was written by the chief of department of the New York City Police Department? Like, no way. Come on. This sounds like it was written by an 8-year-old girl. This is what a bum. Come on, what a moron. That's what, that's basically what it is. Like, ooh, look at you, look at me. Like almost like, oh, we're better than you. Tit for tat. That's what this is. Tit for tat pissing match.
Yeah.
This is what comes. Think about it. We're talking about the NYPD, right? An organization. You carry a gun. You're in charge of 35,000. Now it's probably 10,000. How many are left? Rhetorically speaking. But really, I mean, this is just, it's embarrassing. It's a joke.
Yeah, and then Errol Lewis, and I gotta give a shout out to Errol Lewis, because I disagree with Errol Lewis on about every single issue that Errol Lewis ever raises, and he'll tell you the same about me. But we're able to have a respectful dialogue back and forth. And that's something that the chief of patrol, John Shell, isn't able to engage in high-level conversations around issues and talk around issues. So we might not have to agree with each other, but at least we could be respectful of each other. So I'm not even sure what Errol had tweeted here. He tweeted something about like that, the police department should be respectful. Errol Lewis' father was a full-bird inspector in the NYPD. And, like it was unbecoming. So what the NYPD chief of patrol then decided to do is retweet that. And he said, Errol, you've been around a while. And yes, it should be simple. But that is not an isolated incident. This is a personal attack against the administration that Siegel has been doing for several years. We know better. The only reason the article was changed is because we are fed up with the personal attacks on our men and women who protect the city. So, again, Harry Siegel did not attack the rank and file. I've never seen him. I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never seen him attack the rank and file of the NYPD. If somebody knows more, please send it to me. I'll take a look at it. But even if that's the case, he wasn't doing it here. So he was talking about if there was an attack on anybody, it was about the mayoral administration and his politically appointed managers. So Errol, quite frankly, it was mean-spirited to put this article out a day after we buried a hero. The story could have waited while the city still mourns. Errol, you know better. Again, Harry Siegel has a Sunday column in the Daily News that every Sunday it is published. So that was the article he worked on. That is not about a flawed point of view. It's about anti-law enforcement rhetoric orchestrated by anti-police journalists. So he's saying that you're anti-police for doing this, and we're going to control the media, and the media could only report on certain topics at certain times, and they're going to monitor this and police this. Jonathan's death was sad and tragic. The NYPD will continue to honor him while working hard to continue his quest to make our city safe. Trust me, this is an opening to start shaping the narrative. Sitting in silence is not an option. So again, weaponizing the murder of a police officer to cover for his childish behavior.
At the time when this came out, John, you and I both said how disgusting this is. And that's what it is. To our friends and listeners, by the way, just want to say again, thank you for being here. Like and subscribe. We're about an hour and 40 minutes into it, so we'll finish up about 20 minutes. But while we do that, I remember at the height of this, I just thought how disgusting this is. These insecure, egotistical maniacs utilized and weaponized and used the murder of Jonathan Diller, who was posthumously promoted to detective, used his murder as a catalyst and a platform to protect their insecurities and their egotistical maniacs and their cronies at the upper echelon. I thought it was just completely disgusting. It's such an insult to the family. I just hope, honestly, John, the family never had an opportunity to see this or witness it, because we did see it in response to this. Also, we saw Kaz Daughtry at a press conference continue further and actually utilize the murder of Jonathan Diller to continue protecting the egotistical maniacs of Kaz Daughtry, Tariq Shepard, John Shell, Jeffrey Madry, Eric Adams, this is just honestly, it's disgusting. It's insulting. Anybody could see right through this. But to waste taxpayer money on this full-out investigation of DOI to determine that they violated social media policy, because really that's what they did. Ultimately, they violated social media policy, and they created unprofessional and hostile environment. They destroyed the bonds of community and policing. They destroyed the bonds of policing and media, and giving the media an opportunity to hold them accountable. They should want to be held accountable, right? If you're competent in your ability, especially at the upper echelon of position of leadership, you want the public to hold you accountable. I used to always tell my men and women what's so unique about policing and what's different about this type of the job that we have. You have to answer for it a lot, and you have to answer for it. And there's good reason why, right? We have a lot of responsibility. We have a lot of power. It's probably one of the few professions you can walk outside and say, you know what, I'm going to get a cup of coffee, and you can actually find yourself engaged in a gun battle and take the life of another to protect people. And you know what? There's only a few professions that something like that could put you in those precarious positions. So you have a lot of power, and with that power comes responsibility. So you should expect people to hold you accountable. You would want the same if you're on the other side of that fence. But again, unprofessionalism. I just think that this whole report is unnecessary. There's a lot of information, a lot of issues that were not addressed. Particularly this podcast, John, you and myself, we were the first ones to actually get the full brunt, the blitz of this attack from the upper echelon. It was never addressed in this report. So it's more gaslighting. Obviously, there's definitely intervention from the upper echelon, the police department, when it comes to this report. And ultimately, what does it do? They're just stating the facts, and they're basically just saying, hey, they violated social media policy, and they're not going to be held accountable. Because if this is anybody else on any other level within the rank and file, they would be held accountable. If it's someone low level, maybe a cop or sergeant or lieutenant. But clearly, we just see at the upper echelon, they don't have to follow policy, they don't have to follow procedure, and they don't have to remain professional. If John Shell had any inkling that he would be held accountable, and this could actually deter him from becoming chief of department, he would not have taken those actions. But he did, because he knew he wouldn't be held accountable for it, and we see it right here. You know what, John? Let's continue further with this, because it's just a waste of time, but we'll get through it.
Yeah. Well, we can start to wrap this up. So, and then, this is the last point I want to highlight here is, so then they started, when they started getting very scrutinized, when Daughtry and Shell, when their social media use, what they did then was hide behind the official NYPD news account. And, Tariq Shepard was in charge of it, but I believe that they all had a hand in this. And so what they did is, when the retraction happens by the Daily News, and the Daily News retracts it immediately, when that happens, the official NYPD News Twitter tweets out this: "We thank NYPD Daily News for correcting the record. The men and the women of the NYPD who work tirelessly 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 12 months a year to protect the city of New York. It's a shame that Harry, deceitful Siegel, refuses to recognize that." So completely dishonoring and disrespecting the hard work of those same men and women who work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and painting them as complete children. This is completely unacceptable. And so what was done about this? Absolutely nothing. Like you said, Eric, absolutely what's going to be done about this, and then we could go into the whole flag raising thing. The report goes pretty in depth, but at the end of the day, this was a huge waste of millions of dollars in taxpayers' money. So here's what the OIG's recommendations. They made 6 recommendations. They wrote this lengthy report that took them months. They spent all this time in investigation. Here's what they said: memorialize in writing an internal review and approval process for posts on executive accounts, which they don't have to date. They have a social media policy. Why that does not, why executives are exempted from that policy, I'm still having a hard time figuring that out. Update all relevant patrol guide procedures and administrative guide procedures to align with the requirements of the citywide social media policy. Review the citywide social media policy, ensure NYPD complies with all of its requirements. 4, update the department's social media policy to include rules and guidance about the appropriate content and language for posting in official social media accounts. 5, assign digital communication officers, not those that are going to run out and murder people in New Jersey while they're drunk at work, not those people, including at the executive level, to ensure that social media posts are consistent with the citywide and department policy and memorialize this requirement in writing. Provide training to all staff using official agency social media regarding the citywide social media policy and department social media policy and best practices. Blah, blah, blah.
I tell you right now, if I was working in the NYPD, if I was still working and I had this literature and I was sitting there reading this, I actually had the paper, I would take this thing, I would crumble it up and throw it right in the trash. Go, this is garbage. They spent millions of dollars, months on this, and that's your recommendation. So what? We already have social media policy in place. What change do we need to make? How about we actually just follow the policy? It goes just like we said earlier, John, about the overtime. Why don't we just follow the policy that's already been implemented? So we need you to regurgitate the same information that's already there that they follow the policy. That is trash. That's a waste of time. All that garbage that was written months is a waste, and they left out the most important part: the attacks on John and myself. And why is it important? Because we're two retired lieutenants, right? We're private citizens, but we're retired, and there should be some affinity to say, you know what? They serve with the police department. Let's give them a little honor and respect. But instead, they tried to suppress that with First Amendment speech, and they showed how fast. There's no loyalty. If you criticize the upper echelon, they'll forget you ever served with the New York City Police Department. And they came at this podcast full force. It didn't matter. And you know what? We were never timid and we were never meek because we understand the silver linings and the workings of the police department. But what about Harry Siegel, Rocco Pascadola? They were never members of the NYPD. Think about them. They probably felt extremely meek and intimidated. What about Mike Colon? He was never a cop. He's a podcast in New Haven, Connecticut, who just happened to have an affinity for the NYPD, the fire department. And he does a great job, and he honors the police department. And they tried to shame him and tried to shit on him, and yet there was never any repercussions. And this is what they come up with? Absolutely ridiculous. It's stupid. You know, Rob Lucas, shout out to you, brother, says executives, keep it simple, stupid, highlight the great work of the members of the department. It's exactly that, right? We used to have that acronym in the Marine Corps. KISS, keep it simple, stupid. That's all. But them putting their emotions involved and being so emotionally invested just completely deteriorates it. And it actually deflects from the great work that the rank and file, because unfortunately, people don't remember the great stuff. People remember bad, right? You can do 100 things right. You do one thing bad. What do people remember? And that's what they're doing. They just completely deteriorate everything for the police department. John, we could take that whole thing, throw it right in the trash, because that's what it's worth. 0.
And listen, and here's the other thing. Even if it actually outlined policies and procedures that like made absolute any sense, I mean, all the stuff's there. They just needed to be held accountable to it. I mean, look at what everything that's coming out of New York City. So the people that were in charge that allowed on-duty booty, that allowed hundreds of millions of dollars in tax money to be illegally spent and stolen, overtime to be performed from people while they were at home. While all of that was going on, those people are still in charge of now ensuring the integrity of the overtime. Then we have them acting like little children on social media. And guess what? The people that were acting like children on social media are the people that are going to come up with this policy and enforce the policy to ensure that the rank and file of the NYPD doesn't do what they did. I mean, like, where's the integrity in any of this? It's gone. Integrity's lost, and it has everything to do with a man named Eric Adams, because he's showing that he will not let a female police commissioner run the police department as she sees fit. Because if he did, I guarantee you, Kaz Daughtry, John Schell, Tanya Kinsella would no longer be a member of the New York City Police Department. Either would Tariq Shepard.
That's exactly that, right? I honor Colin Powell. That's a man of leadership. That's, in my opinion, Colin Powell should have ran for president of the United States. And he talks about leadership in his book. It says swift and immediate, right? You have to take action swift and immediate to actually have an impact. And then you move on from there. You forget and you forgive. But how can we move on? Because it was never addressed. The elephant in the room has never been addressed. There was no discipline, no action taken. Juju, shout out to you, $9.99 Coffee and Donuts says, clarification. All Jujus assigned to Operation Juju 8 only compensated for monitoring purveyors of disinformation. This podcast is tiny and inconsequential. No donuts today, shall ate them. Anyway, thanks for the laugh, brother. We appreciate it. But there is a full operation to watch this podcast. That's proof right there. There is a full operation to watch this podcast by John Shell, the upper echelon tries to press us. It was not addressed in this report. You know what? Frankly, John, I don't even care. I don't care because really the message is that we want people to have free speech. You should have an environment where you're not afraid of the police department. Harry Siegel should not fear that if he puts a tweet out there that he's going to get attacked by the police department and potentially be locked out and not have access to information so he can write a story. And you know what? Tiffany Caban is a complete wacko and lefty. But you know what? That's my opinion. And there's people that side with her. And if she wants to put out a statement, so be it. She has the right to do it. And if Mike Cologne wants to say something on his podcast, so can he. What happened to First Amendment speech? And that's my point. John Shell, he's the chief of the department, but you're still a cop. You took an oath under the Constitution, and you're violating the Constitution by trying to suppress others' First Amendment speech. How terrible is that? That's coming from the upper echelon of the police department. Who better? Not only are you supposed to lead the example for the rank and file, but you're supposed to lead the example for the Constitution. You're supposed to lead the example about being good and about being humble. We don't see any signs of humility when it comes to the upper echelon. But, John, this was never addressed when it happened. It has zero impact. Nothing's going to be done now. Take this report, throw it in the garbage because it's useless. This is an opportunity for Jessica Tisch to actually look at that report and say, you know what? It was never handled then. Complete the mistake, and I'll take the action now. But I don't see it happening. I see this going nowhere. It's unfortunate, but that's where I see it going. Absolutely right to the trash.
Yeah, absolutely. Last thing, Cecil Sledge was a police officer in the NYPD. He was murdered in the 6-9 precinct about 45 years ago. His killer is up for parole now. If you guys could go to the PBA website, take 2-3 minutes of your time and to basically click a few buttons and ask the parole board to deny Cecil's killer parole. They also have a list of other officers who were murdered, whose murderers are up for parole. I think the PBA, as much as we bash them, they did a great job on the website. It won't take you a long time at all. You could do Cecil, or you could do many other cops, letters to the parole boards right away. So it's something I keep an eye on, especially with Cecil. Cecil Sledge is I'm a good friend of his son. And, I think it's horrible what happened. He grew up without a father. I believe Cecil was murdered when he was like literally a baby. And, terrible thing. And, these people should not go free. I believe, murder is the ultimate sin. So if you guys could do that, we'd appreciate it if you find it in your heart. Another thing about Cecil Sledge is Cecil Sledge's uncle, if any of you guys ever watched Band of Brothers, The Pacific, that is based around Sledge, which is Cecil Sledge's uncle. Cecil Sledge, also a Vietnam vet, turned NYPD officer, murdered in the line of duty. It was because of Cecil Sledge's murder that NYPD officers were mandated to work with partners, because the week that Cecil was murdered, he was actually working in a sector car by himself because his partner was out sick. So just a little NYPD history. So, rest in peace to Cecil Sledge. And if you guys could do that, we'd appreciate you.
No, it's amazing. We talk about this all the time. It's interesting. If you look at families throughout the country in the United States, you see a deity of service. A lot of times in families, and particularly with the Sledge family, you can see there's a deity of service, right? Service in the military, service in law enforcement. And I consider law enforcement, on parallel with serving in the military. It's a life of service. And so is the fire department. When you put others before you put yourself, and you put yourself in danger, that is a life of service. And we see a deity. So you know what? Shout out to the Sledge family. That's an awesome picture, by the way. I love that picture of Cecil Sledge. You see that old school cop, that look, those masculine traits. It's just, it's so cool to have that deity of service. And unfortunately, I think we're losing that. We lost that deity of service because, I myself, I'm going to tell my son, don't become a cop. You know what? I'm not going to push him away from the military, but if he wants to be a cop, obviously, we never tell my son what to do, but I'm going to tell him, you know what? I recommend you don't be a cop right now, unless things change. And I'm sure the same thing goes for you, John. I'm going to tell my son, my daughters, this is not the time to be a law enforcement officer. You can't serve in the manner that you really could exemplify and really attribute to public safety because of politics and legislation. I mean, hopefully things change for the best. That's why we do a podcast. That's why we speak out. And we want to be the squeaky wheel that gets the oil, our friends and listeners. But we lose that deity of service because we're not passing on the information generation to generation and creating that desire for other family members to come on law enforcement. So, you know what, John, I'm glad that you read that out. That was outstanding. I actually had chills. All kidding aside, I hope we never forget. You're right. Someone that kills a cop, you should never see the light of day.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to VSN Venturas, $5 to the podcast. Hey, Juju, this is me. I have no alternate accounts. Go slander someone else, you toolbox. John and Eric, enjoy some more Republic credits. Thank you, people. Listen, we'll be on here tomorrow. We got Vernon J. Gerberth coming on here, retired NYPD lieutenant, detective commander. So he's coming on. He wrote the book, The Godfather of Homicide. Definitely going to be a good one. I definitely don't miss it. He'll be on here tomorrow, 8:05. He'll probably jump on with us pretty early into that, maybe a few minutes into that. So we're looking forward to hearing about his life, his career, his book. So I think you guys will enjoy it, especially you police buffs. He was the murder police, so it'll be an interesting take. So, yeah, that's it, man. We'll be back tomorrow. Eric, got anything before we get out of here?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to tomorrow. So in most cases, I usually like to meet people after I read their book. So this is going to be reverse engineered. I'm actually going to meet him before I read the book. I will read the book afterwards, so I look forward to it. We'll see you tomorrow, 8:05 live. Of course, 5:05 Pacific. And remember, we expect professionalism from the police department. Stoicism. Read about stoicism. It's really a key element to leadership. Our friends and listeners, thank you so much. Like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888-901 Blue. That's 888-901 Blue.